Welcome to Headlines. This is David Lichtenstein here in the Yeshiva Shalmaila. Among the many questions and comments I get from listeners is, where'd you get the name Yeshiva Shalmaila? And the answer is, Rabbi Moshe Shapiro stayed here for Shabbos by us. One of the last two Shabbosim, he was in America. He stayed here twice. And he suggested the name a few times, a few years ago as well as recently. He said it's a virtual yeshiva. He said, give it the name, the Yeshiva Shalmaila. Now, this week's topic, we're going to be speaking about should parents be sending their kids to a high school that does not have reading, writing, and arithmetic, the 3 R's, and are they handicapping them for life? I had one listener who told me a parent who sends their kid to high school without reading, writing, and arithmetic is over or Maka Reyu Baseser. I mean, the kids are 13, for heaven's sakes. What do they know? At 13, think back. What did you know? Now, I'm not going so far, but we've certainly got a lot of comments. We put almost all of them up on the website, except for those that unfortunately, we get people who say things that they shouldn't be put up on the website. But a lot of passionate response, which is wonderful. I often quote the tshuva from the great Baal Moshe. He says that a person has the right, if he has a Aryeh or a teretz, to argue on anybody. He says to Adam Pashas, who is writing the greatest posek who will ever live in the Western Hemisphere until Mashiach comes, he says, of course you should argue with me. So I enjoy and I appreciate the passionate comments, and even those who say like nasty things, I don't take it personally, bless you all. So does it make a difference, high school? Now, I'm not talking about necessarily biology, because most of us are not going to become physicians and recoil at the sight of blood, or necessarily science. I'm talking about, let's say, just the basics for the purpose of this. You have many yeshivas, they don't teach anything. The kids can't write, they can't read. So I figured, what do I know? Right? I'm just an observer. I see Nebuchadnezzar, the tzedakah cases, the people who are struggling so miserably to earn a living. So I figured, what did we do? We went to the 2 people I know who are IIwith full-time in this field, substantially. One is Gedalia Weinberger, who is the head of PCCS in Lakewood, which has graduated thousands and thousands of people who he's put on either to accounting or computers, where they earn a very respectable parnasa. He trains them. And he will be speaking about, we had him last week, but I will replay the clip where he talks about how they stopped, for the most part, taking people who didn't go to high school PCS. The learning curve is too much. And who's the other person? We got in Eretz Yisrael. We tracked him down. The head of the Machon HaParnasa, Dr. Alan Kadish. Machon HaParnasa is in Borough Park. It also has thousands and thousands of students, most who come from a very weak high school background, who talks about its effect on Parnasa as well. So let's go to the experts instead of, like I like to say, Reb Nachum in the Meir always used to say, what's Eid mi Pied is puzzle. He says, Devas vei zaktish, Devas zakt veis nicht. It's hearsay. Let's go to the people who really deal with it. Now we put together a small collage of the callers. You can skip over this if you don't like, but we got a lot of comments. We took the highlights of some of the, 50 or 100 calls that we got on this.
Your Aryeh from the studies is no shaykhis. The studies is a guy that, the other option is not being in high school at all, not being in yeshiva. Meaning if a guy ditched high school, didn't go to college, didn't go to any high school, dropped out on the street, yes, he has no chance to make the money. Guys that dropped out with yeshiva is way different than a guy dropping out to high school and is on the street.
Sure, you're aware that today all these stuff are a lot less negeya with all the technology. You don't have to know math. You can just talk into the phone and it prints it for you. So all these stuff are a lot less negeya. And everyone knows that people who learn Gemara know the things a lot better. I know of now 5 Heimische guys, like in between Mitzvah Chassidish, who did not learn English at all, probably in Cheder even not, who are going to school now to become doctors, and they cream the rest of the class every test, even though these guys are in college their whole life.
Hi, Rabbi Lichtenstein. I just wanted to ask you, I'm just wondering, you had a whole speech and a whole show about English. I know you always say Rabbi Moshe is the place to Qatar in America. I don't know how, I know you're a big Talmud Chacham, how did you miss that Rabbi Moshe, Yeridea Beis, Hey Beis, who answers it? I don't know how you conveniently skip that out, and I'm sure you do know it because you're a big Talmud Chacham. So I'm just wondering, like, what happened to that Rav Moshe? It should be zero mention. Second of all, I'm wondering why, when you introduce a partial Schechter, you say that I'm sure you all know what his opinion is going to be. So you obviously do realize who's going to hold what. And third of all, I think you should stop worrying so much about parents crippling their children by not giving them the opportunity to take English courses, and worry more about the parents that overdose their kids on secular studies and giving them all types of iPhones and iPads and taking away their bechira and opportunity and crippling them from becoming a Talmud Chacham. I think that's a lot more of a serious issue to talk about and to worry about kids at 12, 13 who I'm personally involved with in the school. And I do see what's going on in 7th and 8th grade with the more modern parents that are giving their kids all sorts of tablets and iPhones and access to internet and Xboxes. I think that's a lot bigger of a crisis to speak about than parents not giving their children English.
Yeah, hi. I'm trying to figure out why you are so busy in the previous show with general statistics in the whole world about high school dropouts. High school dropouts are exactly that, they're dropouts, and the reason why they're dropping out is because they obviously have low IQ, but from people when they drop out, they're dropping out because they want to learn, so it has nothing to do with it. From people that drop out are of higher IQ, and therefore they could make up whatever they lost when they decide to go get a job.
I would like to comment because the whole thing about English, which, whether you agree or not, quoting studies were done of the success rate of people with a high school diploma without a high school diploma is really very inaccurate due to the fact that these studies were all done with Goyim and people who are many times on a lower intelligence level, and I think the average Yeshiva buffer, I don't know where the that you got at UNC, they can't do 5 times 5. I don't know if he's learning disabled or not, but I think your average Yeshiva buffer, with or without English, could do 5 times 5, could do pretty well. And besides the fact that even with English education, the point of English education is merely to get a diploma, and most Yeshivas don't really give any topic education that will help you in the world today. No yeshiva that I know of, any good yeshiva has computer courses or economics courses, which if they were actually, even the yeshivas that do have English, if they were out to teach you an umnus, the things that they teach are pretty outdated and useless, and just to get you a diploma, and a diploma itself I think is pretty much it's pretty useless. So I think quoting these studies is a very inaccurate way of
Rabbi Moshe Feinstein in Yeridea, Pei Aleph, Pei Beis, Pei Gimel speaks very strongly against secular studies. And they thought that, they said, why did you omit that? And I said, the way I read the Tshuva is Rabbi Moshe is talking about secular studies post-high school. So doubt was niggling me because it's somewhat vague. So we called up the Reb Reuven Feinstein yesterday to Rosh, and we spoke to his Rebbitzin. And the first thing I said, did the Rosh go to high school? And he said, of course the Rosh went to high school. I said, he goes to secular studies? He said, yeah, Moshe sent him. I said, but what about, she says, oh, you can ask me about the famous tshuva about English. He says, that Moshe was against it was post-high school. This is as of last night from, now, to me it was a double pashut because Moshe had 2 high schools. He had both in the Siftet Teferes Yerushalayim, there was a high school. In Staten Island that he formed for the Go'er Luchabachrim, there was a high school. His kids went to high school. His Einikelach went to high school. So Chas v'Shalom to say that he would do different than what he wrote in his Chuvas. But I thought, being that a number of callers had commented on that, I thought it was important to comment. Now, last week I said, can we get somebody who could defend it? And we have a Rosh Kollel, a Rosh Chabur in BMG. Today he's the principal of Big Yeshiva. His name is Reb Dovid Beyda. He's a Machon who does not send his kid to high school, and he will tell us why. Another topic we will talk about today is we get a lot of calls. Are there things we should not be speaking about? Like here on this program, we speak about everything from surrogate motherhood to whether older single girls can have children, to addictions and alcohol addiction, gambling addiction, internet addiction, etc. As many other topics, mental health. And you have no right to be speaking about it. This is, we'll have a Chassidish Rav from Williamsburg, a Mashpia, Rav Kahane. He's going to give us the Chassidish view on it. And then we're going to close off with Rabbi Broyde, who actually established a Machon to come out with textbooks that do not have anything objectionable, be it illustrations, be it theology, etc., that is neged HaTorah, and he's selling them to Yeshivas. It's very interesting to hear his opinion. So we have a wonderful program. I would like to start off with a short word. We have this week Truma Tetzaveh, and then you have Vayakel Pikudei, which are all about the Mishkan. The first two are Va'asisa, Truma Tetzaveh, and in the end it's Vayas, how they created the Beis Elokim, the Mishkan, which is both the metaphor. It talks about the actual Mishkan, but it's about the relationship with Kaviyachal. And remember, the house of Klal Yisrael, every Yiddish house is a Mishkan, and every person is also a Mishkan. Bilvavi Mishkan Evne. So the question is, between both halves, we have a terrible story, the biggest chait that ever happened, right? The chait Egel, which the Gemara says that every time the chait Egel is around forever, every time that there's some type of a punishment, it includes some punishment, a trace of it of the chait Egel, whatever, certainly a most powerful chait. Why is it stuck right in middle of this construction of the Mishkan? And I saw one of the Sfarim write, he says it's a lesson to us all. We want to build something beautiful, be it a house, be it a Makom Kadish like a yeshiva, be it a relationship, a holy relationship, be something that some goal we have, and then we do something wrong. Something bad happens, we get setback, and it could be a really big setback where it says Vayichar Af Hashem, where it causes a shvira of the luchais, where all our plans seem to be thrown and broken and trampled on, a big mistake, maybe something tamei, maybe something ra. And you know what the Torah says? Right afterwards, it goes to Vayakel Pikudei. Something bad happened, we pick up the pieces, we put the shivrei luchais in the aron, and we just continue building the Mishkan. And it's certainly a story of my life. I don't know if it's a story for your life. How often we have setbacks where we just want to sit down and crumble or cry. And you know what? In the middle of the binyan HaMishkan, there's the Egel. And what is it? The Rabbi Shalom says on the second binyan, Kashet Siva Hashem es Moshe. All over Vayakol Pikudei is Kashet Siva Hashem es Moshe. So if in something I'm doing or you're doing, in the middle some Egel pops up, and all its destruction, and all the damage, and the pain, and the depression, you know what we do? We go and we make Vayakel Pikudei, and that's why it comes in this week's Parshas. Which, just as a continuation, I heard of something, a beautiful Torah I want to share with you. We have this week the Menorah, and the Menorah is the only kli from the Mishkan that we still have a remnant of. The Ramban in the beginning of Bachukaisei says that every Yiddish house on Hanukkah, according to what Ramban learns, the menorah from the Beis HaMikdash is in every home. And to a lesser extent, every shul has a menorah. The coins, the first coins we find, the Machzah Shekel had a menorah. So the menorah almost seems to symbolize, our relationship, Klal Yisrael. And the menorah was made miksha, was beaten out of one piece, which is interesting, because you have Chakika. You have, when they made the luchais, they carved them out, they engraved, there was psilas, they threw away the extra, whatever. Moshe took the extra of the sapphire, right? It was carved out. We have the concept of a pesel, where we take a stone and we discard all the left, and what comes out emerges as the statue. But miksha is different, and it says Moshe could not figure out the miksha. Niskasha Moshe. So Betzalel did it. And I heard a beautiful Torah from a chavrus of mine, right, the great Baal Machshav, Rabbi Yitzchak, and he said miksha represents when you take something and you don't lose anything, And no matter every part of it, somehow you're able to twist and hammer, and every piece of it emits light. And what does that represent? It represents so many times we have a setback, we get angry, or we get depressed, and we say, "Oh, this is waste." It's not. Depression is a good time to do tshuva, to have charata, zivas achet. Anger is a good time. It says, "L'tzanis, kol l'tzinusa asura, chutz milatzinusa d'avodah zara." Anger, vayigval libay b'darkei Hashem. It's a time to every midah. So what does miksha mean? All those setbacks to be channeled into creating light. And Moshe couldn't do that, because what do we know about Moshe? It says, when Moshe v'yarisei nismala kalabayis ira, it seems Moshe was born nismala bayis ira, according to this chazal. He grew up as a prince, but Salil, he grew up in the shadows. Gam kielech begate salmavis, the shadow of death, in the dark side. Somebody who was in the dark side, he could understand miksha. I know what it means, setback means. I know what darkness means. I know what depression means. I know what anger means. I know what disappointment means. I know what gaiva and taiva. I know what all of that means. But I'm miksha. I know how to turn that into positive energy too. So if you're feeling like you're having a bad time or a bad day or something, you know what? What's our avodah miksha? How do we turn it into something positive? Before we go to our guest, I would like to give a little bit hagdama on the topic of Limudei, which we discussed last week. And you'll hear this throughout the conversations, but I would like to take a few minutes just to lay it out. Many of us have heard it, but I think I put it together. The Bryce in Kedushin and Daf Chavtes says, a father's chiyuvim ala son. He has to be malhim. He has to, and one of them is the Limudei, right? And Rabbi Yehuda says, if you don't teach your son an you're teaching him how to be a thief. Because what's going to happen? He's going to have to feed his family. He's going to have to eat himself. Now, here's another Gemara. The Gemara in Kedushin and Daf Pei says, Reb Meir says, La'olam yilmei b'noi kalo nakiya. Teach your son something kalo nakiya. Reb Nurai says, this is the famous Reb Nurai, Meiniach HaNeis kol sheba olam ve'enei melamed b'ni ela Torah. Seemingly, he would argue. So the Machon Kedushin and Daf Chavtes says, no, Avadi's not arguing, because he quotes the Mishnah in Avis. Kol Torah she'eni ma'malacha seifa betela. So he says, what is Reb Nurai saying, Eini Milam B'ni El Torah? He sort of twists it a little bit. He twists Reb Nurai's arm. He says, Ella, he says, you should make Malachtei Aroy v'terasei kfa. So he says, Avada, Reb Nurai doesn't argue, and he says, Chayiv Lamed B'nai but he says it, right? But it means make your Torah kfa. It's really not mashmidas, honestly, in the Lashon of Reb Nurai. But he says, even the Chassidim Rishainim, asu terasin kfa u'malachtam aray. Now the Makna, the Baal Hafla, the great Pirish on Kedushin, he says a different thing. He says Rav Nudnoi is talking about somebody who is such incredible emunah in Hashem, who wants to be saimach on a nes. He says if you want to be saimach on a miracle, right? He says that is Reb Nehurai. But he says that's what the Gemara says. The Gemara in Brachas, it says there was a machlekes Reb Shimon bar Yochai. Should a person make terasei nasai and not be mekayim v'safta de ganecha? So there's a machlekes in the Gemara. So Rabbi said that yes, the person does not have to be mekayim v'safta de ganecha, and Rabbi will take care of you. So what does the Gemara say? Harbu asu kain v'loy ol sabiyad, they couldn't live on miracles. So the Makna says Reb Nurai and Rashbi are both talking about people who want to be saimach on the nes. So take it down to more modern generations. Let's skip a few hundred years. And we come to the great Briskerov, who says Avada. Reb Nurai and Reb Meir do not argue, because Reb Meir and Nurai were the same person. So what does he say? He says very similar, and the Kavit Shurim says the same thing. Rabbi Yasha brings it lahalacha. The Kavit Shurim was asked, what do? We know Olam Chayiv Adam Ne'omnes, and you have now Reb Nurai. What is the great Kavit Shurim? And the Kavit Shurim had the great Yeshiva of Baranovich, where they did not teach Omnes. And he was the greatest yeshiva in Lithuania. Everybody who went to Meir or Brisk, all the Mitzianim learned by Rabbi Chanan. And Rabbi Chanan was a great kanoi. Right? What does Rabbi Chanan write? He says, Avada, we paskin chayav adam labnei umnis. He says, only by bias hamashiach will we be able to live without umnis. He says, Reb Nurai is talking about those elef nichnas ve'echad yaitza, the yechidim who will light up the world with their Torah. He says, avada, those do not have to be malamed b'nai umnis. What is it? So that seems to be the conclusion of almost all poskim. We will bring one or two shittas that argue. And what is the Shulchan Aruch? Shulchan Aruch in Shinvav in Hilchos Shabbos says you're allowed to hire a teacher for your children on Shabbos, umnis, a math teacher. Why? Because it's a mitzvah. The dvar mitzvah you're allowed to do. And the same thing in Makis, it says if a person hit his son who doesn't want to study, who doesn't want to learn umnis, he doesn't go to Gullus because he's doing a dvar mitzvah. And the Rambam paskins like this in Hilchos Shabbos. The Torah Chaim Kufnun Vav brings Yafa Talmud Torah Derech Eretz. And what is in Kufnun Vav sort of to be the grab all at the end of, on Hagas Hada Baboiker. So it says after you finish Shachris and learning, you go out to work. So he says if you have to go to work, the Torah says, because if not, poverty is maver a person al das Kahane, makes the person angry at the Rabbeinu Shalom. The Magen Avram in Kufnan Vav brings Chayav Adam Labnei Yonis. Now here are a few outliers, Shitas. And by the Yeshua says the same thing. When he explains Reb Nurai, he says Reb Nurai saying is in Bnei Malach Uzaras, if you have an exceptional son, he's the son who does not have to go. But everybody else has to teach his son in Umnis. Rebbe Yashiv in Kayvitz Chuvas, we'll put this on our website, with all our Marakayas Yeridea, Simin Kufla Mites, brings Rabbi Chanan as a pashtus when he was asked if somebody should teach his son in Umnis. There are many, many other Gemaras. The Gemara in Bab Metzi and Aflamed Beis, when it says V'haidata lohem zebeis chayayim, so Rashi says it goes on the Gedolei Hador that what's the jars lilmoid lehem umnis lesparnis. Right. So this seems to be now. Who are some of the exceptions? The exception that I would find, even the great Nefesh HaChaim, by the way, when the Nefesh HaChaim brings Reb Nurai, he says, Harbu asu came v'lo also be adam. He brings Maimar Eshbi. He says, when you're talking about the Harbe, the masses, he says over there, lo also be adam. But avada for Yechidim, Yechidei Skula, of course, we always have to have the great luminaries. Now, interesting, here are a few exceptions. Rav Moshe Feinstein says, given that there is such a need for Abayim today in Malamdim, he says if you teach your son Torah, he has a job. He's going to become a Rebbe. The Meiri seems to see the same thing as well. He says, let him become a Machanach, become a Rebbe. This is the Gris Moshe Yeridei Lamed Vav. So he says, since when noig today to be teach? Now, so the question is, well, unfortunately, Rabbeim jobs, if you ask many schools, they'll tell you every time a position opens, there are 25, 50, or if it's a high school, it could be 100 applicants for one job. So we have to question. Rav Moshe wrote this, 50, 70 years ago when there was, a post-Holocaust where we needed Rabbeim desperately. I don't know, are there really Rabbeim jobs? So here is the outlier, the one who I was able to find who does not seem to hold, and it's the Stipler writes, he was asked, the Stipler writes, he says, La'olam yomid adam es b'nai umnas kal nakiya. So the Stipler wrote, and I saw this in writing, I didn't see it, I saw it, somebody brings it. He says, the halacha is that if somebody's son died because of Mila, the second son you don't have to. So he says, today we see that business, there's so few Yirei Shamayim in business, he says, so many people who are going to go out, they're going to become dishonest. They're going to leave the Yirei Shamayim. So he says, therefore, Bizman Hazeh, Chayiv Adam Lamed B'nayum, this has changed. Interesting. He says, the Halacha in the Shulchan Aruch, the Gemara, the Rambam, it's all changed because today the people, it seems, are unusually dishonest, which is very interesting. I remember learning the Gemara in Shabbos. It's like Kuf Yotesam at Beis, Kuf Lamed, Kuf Chaf. The Gemara says that when was the Beis Hamikdash Nechrav? Batla mimenu anshe amana. When there are no more people with integrity. So the Gemara says, there were no more people of integrity. Gemara brings Kama Psukim that there were many Talmidei Chachamim in Yerushalayim. So the Gemara in Daf Kuf says, no, Berchayves Yerushalayim. There were no more businessmen with integrity. Everybody became a thief. Were thieves. Like the Gemara, that's when Charv Yerushalayim. Similar, like the Gemara says, Rav Yisroel Ganvei. There's two pshatim in the Mefarshim, but Pashtus, right? So it seems 2,000 years ago they struggled with the same thing. A lot of dishonest business people. And notwithstanding that, the Gemara still says, 600 years later, Chayiv Adam L'Lamed B'nayumnis. The same Gemara that says, Rav Yisroel Ganvei. So I just look at the great Stipler, the great guy in the Stipler Rav, who I saw so many times, and I bought his forum, and I went to him for brachas, and I say, really, today it's changed. It's just a Kadish. You don't see it elsewhere. And I'm showing that there are many Gemaras that talk about how Klal Yisrael, in the times of, the Nevi'im, etc., of Yerushalayim, were not such honest people. So, but that is the one outlier shita that I was able to find. Okay, enough of me. Let's go to our wonderful guests. Again, I like to remind you, almost all the comments, almost all the emails you can find on our website. We've put almost them all. So if you send something in, you can go there, people listen, comment, etc. Let's go to our guests.
One of the Rosh Yeshivas, the two Rosh Yeshivas.
Define handicapped, Reb Gedalia. What is handicapped?
They can't multiply 5 times 5. How are you going to do something in accounting? How can you do some real estate when you have to deal with amortization and complex computations to find out if something is profitable or not? How can you deal in the world if you can't read and write English well?
So do you find that many of them unable to complete the PCCS courses? Do they drop out? Do they take a simpler course in something more blue collar? Like, what happens to them?
Yeah, well, listen, really in reality we don't let them in, because we learned that those who don't have the right skill set to be able to complete the course would just be wasting their time and their money. So we do a lot of pre-screening, and those people who we think are not going to be able to make it, we don't say anybody that we will not let you in. We just really dissuade them from taking it because we don't think they're going to be able to succeed. And that's true whether we're teaching them computing, whether we're teaching them real estate investing, whether we're teaching them accounting. It carries out throughout, really. So many of them go. Some of them take blue-collar jobs, unfortunately. That really does happen. And then they're crippled all the time. And, some of them are existing on programs and various government support, and they are trapped in that because they just can't afford to get off them. And it's really a very sad situation, but that does happen.
We have on the phone with us, actually from Eretz Yisrael, from Israel. He's traveling, but he was so nice as to give us a few minutes. Dr. Alan Kadish, who is the head of Touro, and he is the president of Touro. He is also the head of Machon HaParnasa in Brooklyn, which I believe it's in Borough Park. You'll fix me. You'll correct me if I'm wrong. Which is probably the single largest educator of those who are sort of marginally graduated from high school. And I figured we're having Dr. Kadish. We are having a big debate, and I'm just a lot of it is hearsay for me as to whether high school education is necessary or not. And many people say, well, all the statistics about high school education being necessary, that those who don't go to high school earn far less in their lives than those who do go to high school, are by basically dropouts who are white trash, etc. But yeshiva guys who go on to learn, and they go to Koil or they learn a Beis Medrash, they're equivalent of having like a doctoral degree. These statistics are not relevant, and we see both in the Hasidic and the Yeshivish world, people without a high school degree are equally matzliach or very matzliach, and I figured rather than just picking numbers out of the air or just listening to this one speech and that one speech, let's go to the people who have the best data and actually educate these people. Last week we had Rabbi Gedalia Weinberger of PCS. This week we have the honor of having you. Give us a little bit of data and your feedback on this topic.
So thank you for asking me once again to be on the show with you. It's always a pleasure. I don't have as much data, comparison data of different groups, because I can only tell you about the students who attend Machon Parnasa. But let me start by saying the following. First of all, there's no question that there are people who are tremendously successful in the business world, in other worlds, and even in law school, who have not had a strong high school education. There's no question that that's true. Because there's a small subset of our community that's, Baruch Hashem, incredibly talented, and they pick it up on their own. And so for those people whom it's not clear you can identify in advance, for those select couple of percent, it's true, you can be tremendously successful without a significant high school education. But our experience has been that for the majority of students, I don't want to say average, but let's just say for the majority of students, getting to be in the 17 to 21 year age range without having basic skills in English, in math, and in communication really do hinder your ability to move forward. So in Machon and Parnasa, we have a very diverse student body, but we certainly have a significant number of students who have not had a strong secular high school education. And we actually have programs in Machon and Parnasa that teach them remedial math and remedial English. And many of the students who are motivated, who go through those programs, are able to succeed. But some of them certainly struggle. And so my feeling is that although the argument about financial data not being clearly present in this group may be somewhat true, my feeling from experience is that if we got students who had basic skills that they learned in high school, such as the students who go to other Touro campuses, their immediate success in college would be much better, and their long-term ability to succeed would also be better.
Now, Dr. Kadish, what about people who say, you know, if you're not going to college, which many of the yeshiva light, I guess, won't go to because they come out of Kollel or the Chassidim, most of them don't go to college, and they say, look, I'm going to go into, I don't know, I'm going to open a store. I'm going to go into real estate. I need to know basic multiplication, basic division, have to know how to use a calculator, and I need to have a working knowledge of English, and all of the above can be acquired in elementary school. I mean, that's an interesting argument. What's your
I think first of all, you need to know a lot more than multiplication and division if you're going to be in real estate or industries like that, as you well know. You need to understand interest rates, how to amortize things. It's far more than just multiplication and division. And the truth is, learning those skills in elementary school and then not using them for years basically means you don't remember anything. And this is anecdotal. I don't have strong data, but I can tell you in speaking to people who run very successful businesses in the frum community, yes, you can open a shop without strong skills. But if you're going to be involved in a major business, you need to understand intermediate level math. You need good communication skills. And unless the venture is only going to be within the frum community, you need to understand and have working knowledge of English. As I said, there's always going to be counterexamples of tremendously successful people who didn't have it because they're the top 1 or 2%. But for most of us, those skills are important. If you look at the surveys that have been done about the level of education and earning power, even though they've not been published, the data do seem to suggest that even in the Hasidic and Yeshivish community, there's still a relationship between level of education and income. And so while there are anecdotal examples of people succeeding without basic skills, I don't think that that's true on a population basis. I think if you're going to succeed in a moderate, even in a moderate way in the business world, you need to be able to communicate. You need to understand English. You need to understand something about the people you're doing business with. And you need not just basic arithmetic, but reasonable math skills, as that's become expected in business as things have become more advanced.
Now, Dr. Kadish, the long-term out for many, let's say, in the Chassidish community has been something like, I'll get a job at B&H. So what would you say to, and I met a few Bachram last night who were giving me a real argument in high school, not necessary. What would you say to a 13, 14, 15-year-old who feels that English, secular studies are a joke, so therefore there's no reason to go for it? Give us a one line that you would tell that boy.
You haven't lived enough.
Would you
and
say
basically,
yeah, go ahead, continue.
No, I mean, I think they're hearing this from other people, but without trying to be condescending, a 13, 14, 15-year-old doesn't know what it takes to succeed. And so they're being told that this is worthless, that it's not necessary. It's the people who are telling them that I think are making this mistake. I can't blame a 13-year-old who hasn't lived, has never had to pay a bill, and doesn't know anything.
And what would you tell the parents of such a person who's making the decision, because it's usually the parents who make that decision, decide not to send their 13-year-old to high school? What would you tell the parents of such a person?
I would tell them I think you're making a mistake. And I would try to recount some of the things we've talked about and hope that without interfering with a Bacher's chance to learn, without interfering with his level of frumkeit, that they would understand that to feel self-sufficient and proud of what you do and support a family, you need more than elementary school.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kadish, for your time.
Thank you. Take care.
We have the honor of having with us on the phone from New Jersey, Rav Dovid Beyda, who was a Rebbe in Meir Yeshiva for many years. He's now the principal. He's a Talmud of Ner Yisroel. He was a Rosh Chabura in Lakewood for a number of years. He learned in Lakewood for at least 7 years. So both an esteemed Mechanech and a Talmud Chacham. Welcome, Rabbi Beyda.
Thank you.
So, Rabbi Beyda, what we are struggling with from both a halacha and a hashkafa point of view is that we know that the Gemara says that a person is supposed to teach his son in Umnis, the Gemara in Kiddushin and Daf Chavtes, and the Shulchan Aruch in Reish Mem Vav in Talmud Torah paskins that way, and in Hilchos Shabbos it paskins that way. You're allowed to even hire a Rebbe on Shabbos to teach your kids in Umnis. It's in Hilchos Reitzeach, the Rambam brings it. In Hilchos Shabbos, the Rambam brings it. And it's also common sense. I mean, we see the way people who don't have an umnus of any type, and I'm not talking about those who are zeicha to become, klei kodesh, but it says 1,000 nichtas, 1,000 nichtas, the echad yaitza. Well, at least 900 of the others are not going to become klei kodesh, or 500 or 700, and many of them will struggle really miserably their whole lives if they don't have any tools at all. And we see it. We see the reliance on government programs that's done out of necessity, not out of choice in many of the cases, I would imagine. So my question is, when people take a young boy and he's 13 years old now, and they want to send him to a school that has no English, and we had on the head of PCCS, which is, a program that I'm very involved in. I think I'm practically 90% of the private support of PCCS comes from me. So I'm very empathetic to the guys who come out of Koil and struggle, don't know what to do.
Sure.
But we have Reb Gedalia Weinberger who heads it, who says, we stopped taking people who didn't go to high school because they're so far behind, we can't teach them even simple computers or accounting or real estate or insurance. Their reading and writing and arithmetic, when you stop at 12 or 13, is just too deficient, if that's the last time you use it. So why would parents want to basically cut their children's arms off at such a young age?
Right. Yeah.
And particularly when the argument would be made is if somebody wants to become a Mechanech, right, speaking good English, a Rosh Yeshiva who gets up in front of a crowd and speaks in elegant English, it makes a Kiddush Hashem. And if he knows math, it'll help him in many places in Erevin and in Baba Basra, etc. So why would a parent want to do that to their child?
Okay. Let's take a step back. I do work in an institution that has a very strong secular department. We do believe in it. I'm a salesman of this commodity, which we call education, and I am, to a degree, a believer in it. At the same time, I have a son in 10th grade who is in a fine, upstanding Mesivta in the Lakewood area that does not offer secular education. Personally, I'm fine with it right now, and I'll explain why. When we give kids an education, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, the things that they study, let's talk about an English class, where they'll have 2 years of a Shakespeare novel, and they'll talk about Frankenstein, and that they'll spend time developing skills in literature beyond the simple reading, writing, and arithmetic. A complete, appropriate secular education has a lot in there, which, in my opinion, is valuable, but it's certainly not necessary to get yourself a decent job in the greater world out there. You can get a job just fine having never read Romeo and Juliet or Macbeth, etc. We do encourage kids to do well in all their courses, despite the fact that, let's talk about trigonometry for a second. You're not going to need trigonometry to be able to function in the real world out there. Most kids are not going to need the trigonometry. That you have a guy getting married who doesn't know what 5 times 5 is not something that comes up through a legitimate high school education. That's something which is supposed to have happened in 3rd grade or 4th grade. It's not something you need. Now, however, the education as we give it in our school is certainly valuable. And the reason why it's valuable is because it makes the individual more well-rounded. It makes the individual more of a thinker. They're able to produce more intellectually, which is extremely valuable. At the same time, that's something which a very strong base in Gemara can give the kid as well. So that, for example, my boy, yeah.
Oh wait, Rabbi Beyda, let me go, because you're mentioning a lot of points. I don't disagree, and I think many people will agree that there's no reason to read Hamlet necessarily or Romeo and Juliet. You could probably learn English in other places, right? But what that argument would be is that the solution is not to have high school. The solution is a better high school, which means a high school that's more focused, like you say. You know, even though I went to work, I did like the Shulchan Aruch and Reish Vav says, if you can try to learn to work, you should. But I will never use trigonometry in business unless maybe you're an architect. I don't know who uses trigonometry, honestly. I
think actuaries more than anybody else.
Actuaries. So, I mean, how many people become actuaries? So the argument would be yes. Is a lot of the curriculum that they teach in high school sort of wasteful? The answer is yes.
No, I never meant to say that. In other words,
but I'm telling you, I would say that. I was not a big chassid of high school, and to be honest with you, the yeshiva where I went, I focused mostly on Limudei Kadish, and I didn't do all that well in high school because it did not interest me. Calculus and trigonometry and geometry, I never met a triangle that was important to me, right? But I think the solution then is a high school that does teach things like, you know, reading, but reading, vocabulary,
so let me get back.
Writing well, public speaking, diction. I mean, let it teach the things that. And in a yeshiva, like in Jersey schools, for certainly yeshivas, the high schools have a choice to make their own curriculum. They have far greater leeway than in New York, where you have regions.
Correct.
Good.
Yes.
So the solution is not to throw the baby out, but just to do it in a more appropriate way, right?
Let's take one step at a time. My second son is in 9th grade right now, and he actually is enrolled in a Mesivta in Lakewood that does offer, it's, I think, 4 times a week for 45 minutes. They get to math, they get to English, with the ultimate purpose of getting a GED, so that there's some secular, something or other that you can point to, that they've had the basic training of reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's exactly what you've been talking about, of looking for this type of a hybrid, where at the same time, he is plugging away at Gittin. He is memorizing Dapim of Gemara, which will make him so much more of a honed thinker, so much more of an intellectual, a trained thinker through learning Gemara. Learning Gemara can train. In other words, when I talk about education as having value to create a well-rounded person who's a thinker, I believe there's value to trigonometry, and I believe there's value to Hamlet. It's just that value that you can get in a much higher abundance from learning Gemara. So I don't necessarily disagree. I don't necessarily disagree that there's value to having this GED program incorporated into a high school. You may want to interview the guy who runs that program. I'll send you his way after. But that.
So why do you send
let's
your
go back to
first
my 10th grade. Let's go back to my 10th grader. Excellent. Go back to my 10th grader. My 10th grader, first of all, the clientele that this Mesivta takes is extremely selective, and it's safe to say 80-90% of the kids coming out of there will go into chinuch, will go into Kadish. So those guys will have an opportunity. Now, let's say for a second the money's not there, the situation doesn't work out, and my 10th grader will need to find a parnasa one day. So he's an on-the-ball, bright guy. It might mean a year in transition. We'll have to take some writing courses. He'll have to take some math courses and get the fundamentals. A guy like that will be able to call up PCCS a year later than what the other guys would have. So I'm setting him back a year to pump out what looks like it's going to be a massive Talmud Chacham. My 9th grader has Yevamos memorized. My 9th grader has learned Yevamos from beginning to end, and you can test on any daf anywhere in the Masechta. It's something which is mind-boggling to me that when I was in 9th grade, my head was in who knows what. That this is amazing. I'm saying the intellectual feat that my kid has pulled off in 10th grade is phenomenal. So I can't look down at that. Yeah, go ahead.
Rabbi Beyda, you should be benched that you have such a. You should get benched. You have Zeichet to have such a wonderful son. But it's interesting if you of all people. Let me share with you something interesting. Rabbi Yashiv in Kovetz Chuvis in Yeridea, it's in Simin Kufla Metes, is asked by somebody. Somebody asked him if he has to teach his son in Umnis, and this is Rabbi Yashiv. I mean, in Yerushalayim, circa 2000. I mean, you don't get more right wing than this. So what does he bring? He says, because Chayiv Adam Lam B'nai Umnis, he says, this halacha, he says, Rabbi Chanan Vasamen, in Kovetz Shiurim, in Chelik Beisim, in Mem Zayin, he says, was done. Now, Rabbi Chanan is famous for having, the Baranovich was the prize yeshiva in Europe. And Rabbi Chanan was a kanoi by any standards. I mean, anybody who's read, the Igris of what he writes about Zionism. So Rabbi Chanan was a real kanoi. So, and what does Rabbi Chanan write? It's in the Kovetz Shiurim, in Chelik Beisim in Mem Zayin. Rabbi Yasha brings it lalacha. He says, Avada, there's a halacha of Chayiv Adam Lalamed B'nai Umnis. He says, but that's for the whole world, right? And really, even the great Nefesh HaChaim, when he says that Rajbi, that Reb Neroi, that Maniach Kolum the Shabail, any Milan B'Yel Torah, he says Harbe Asu came V'Loyasa B'Yadon. So the Nefesh HaChaim writes it's Harbe. It's in Shar Aleph. When it's for the masses, certainly, this is certainly. He says, and here's the lashon of Rabbi Chanan: Avalim roya adam b'bnoi shu muchsher liyaz gadol b'Torah, b'zeh amar Reb Neroi ein melamdei ala Torah. He says, v'loy pligi Reb Neroi. And the Brisker Rav, by the way, says the same thing. The Brisker Rav says, Reb Meir says a person should teach his son Umnis Kala Nakiya. And the same person, and Reb Neroi says, Eini Melamed B'nai Ala Torah. So the Brisker Rav says, Reb Neroi and Reb Meir is the same person. How could they be arguing? And the truth is that the Piskei HaRosh brings both Reb Neroi, Eini Melamed, and he also brings Chayiv Al Melamed. So Rabbi Chanan says, because Yechidim, when you see the Elef Nichtas, the Echad Yaitza, so it's Eser or 50, whatever it is, he says that Klal Yisrael needs Gedolim, who, he says, on this there's no, but he says, but for the masses. So my question is not for maybe somebody like your son, who you say is Mukhshar, but when you have literally dozens of yeshivas, they say that 80 or 90% of drivers think they're above average.
Certainly. I think I am too, and I know I'm not.
Which is a statistical impossibility, right?
Sure.
90% can't believe they're above the 50%. So my point is, how do we have yeshivas that, as a matter of policy, say, okay, everybody in our yeshiva is going to be a gadol hadoyer, and we are therefore not teaching them English. When the Rebbe in the class knows every class has its top 10%, its top 20%, and it has the bottom 20 and 30%.
Okay, I got it.
Clearly,
Okay,
so how do the Rabbeim in these places, the Mechanchem and the parents do something that is both neged halacha, it's neged common sense, it's harming their child, and we're not talking about the pieces that Rabbi Yashiv or Rabbi Chanan talk about, as the Rabbi Roy is speaking about, of those who the Yechidim. That's my question.
Understood. Okay, so I want to harken back to the email that you got about the individual who's stacking boxes in the warehouse somewhere, and that he's furious at his yeshiva, and that he's furious at his Rosh Yeshiva. Correct? We're all familiar with that?
Yes. And okay. sadly, if you speak to Gedalia Weinberger, he won't tell you one like that. He'll tell you many like that.
My years in BMG, and that, when you run a chabura in BMG for those couple of years that I was there, you get a feel for people that are at that stage. I didn't know a lot of 25, 26, 27-year-olds that needed to go out and make a parnasa. I was there with a lot of these guys in the aftermath, and I will say the following. Like I said before, that the well-rounded education that schools that do offer secular studies has a value, even though you'll never use it from a practical standpoint. You'll never use trigonometry, but it has a value that it makes you a more intellectual person. And I continue to argue that Gemara can do that on a much higher level. That said, anybody who is a hard worker, anybody who applies themselves appropriately and gives it their all and gives it their best, it doesn't matter what they're learning in high school. It doesn't matter what they're working on while they're in high school. It could be Gemara. It could be Hamlet. It could be trigonometry. It won't make a difference. And that someone who works hard develops and grows, and that guy who honed his mind during his formative years of 14 to 22 between high school and Beis Medrash, if he was a hard worker and honed his mind, so that all those guys have a very easy time to, you take a year off, you get a GED, you take a year off, you take a computer course, and they figure it out, and PCCS will be very happy to take them once they've gotten themselves trained. The guys who can't make ends meet, who can't figure out a parnasa after the fact, are guys who chilled out the 7 or 8 years, and there are repercussions for that. Those are the good boys in the Sifta who pushed themselves and worked hard, developed and grew into adults who were capable adults in any area, in absolutely any area. You weren't limited to only click like this. So that's what I found. People who are hard workers do well no matter what. People who are lazy, doesn't matter if you have secular studies in high school. If you're lazy in high school for the Gemara, or if you're lazy in high school for your secular studies, you're going to come out without skills no matter what the focus of the Masifta is. So all these Masiftas out there, all these high schools out there that aren't offering secular studies, I don't believe it's fair to say that they're chopping off their arms. If kids do what they're supposed to, they will come out mature, capable, intellectual adults that when push comes to shove and they're 25 and they got to figure out parnasa, they figure it out.
I'm talking about the chiyuv l'lamed umnis, to prepare a kid to one day have to work if he's not going to be a klei
the world out there.
He's not going to be the echad yaitza. So
not the echad yaitza. I'm talking about the working world out there today.
So I'm telling you, the Shulchan Aruch says you do it when he's benoi, when he's a child, when he has the free time, not when he has the obligation. Now, so if we want to argue on the Gemara and say chayiv adam lamed b'nai umnis, you know what? You're old-fashioned. Let's do it when he's 25. He's smarter than. That's great, but that's not the halacha.
What I'm trying to get across is that nowadays, the way the world is set up, having a bright intellectual kid come out at 18 from a Masifta who plugged away and worked hard and put in his time while he was in high school we're not being irresponsible. Because we're not setting them up for failure. Because they are getting skills and they are getting trained in ways that when they hit the workforce, they'll have invaluable skills. They'll have invaluable intellectual skills. That's what I'm trying to argue.
Okay, Rabbi Beyda, thank you very much, and you should be continuing Hatzlacha and the incredible job you do in Deal, being Mechanech Bachrim. You should be Zeichel Kisrei Shel Torah.
Amen. Thank you very much for having me on.
Kulta. We have on the phone with us from Williamsburg, Rav Moshe Aryeh Kahane. He's the Rav of Meir Baal HaNeis, Rosh Machon, Zichron, Kehunawith. He's a Talmud both of Rav Brus and of Rav Mordechai Beck, and he's also a Satmar Chassid. So welcome, Rav Kahane.
Hi, Gittin. How are you?
Oh, good. So we wanted to ask you, we get criticized here on the program for often talking about in Yanim that, we'll have Chassidim or sometimes Bachram call and they say, you can't talk about that Barabim. And we've always said that, when you're talking Torah, there's all parts of Torah sort of they learn in Yeshiva are considered part of the curriculum. And I'd like to know, as a Satmar Chassid, what is your Kabbalah in this matter?
I think it's fair to say that this is actually a difference of opinion between the Chassidish Yeshivas and the Yeshivische Welt, because I know in the Chassidish Yeshivas they will skip certain Mamuram, in Chazal, like Sibs Daftes and other places. And in the Yeshivische Welt, there's no issue. Ich gelernt in Barav Shol Bruzer in Levrucha, and the Ksibes Daftes, Space Spesiach, and other Mamurim, there was no issue with that. But in the Chassidish Yeshivas, I think they will skip. They wouldn't learn those sigis. And in the Chassidish Welt alone, there's also different thresholds. There's some are more strict, some are less strict. So when people say that you shouldn't speak of certain issues publicly, it depends where they come from. It's Eli Vali Devil Kim Chaim. It's just everyone has a different Messiah.
So let me ask you a question. I know that this is sort of like a parva area, but if you look in Shalos Tshuvas Sam Seifa and Simen and Zion, so he says he was Matzia Shailan Hilchas Nida Lebachrim Gedolim, and by the end of Hilchas Nida, he writes, we finished Masechtas Nida and at my yeshiva, which had hundreds of Bachrim. You see the Maram Shik in Yeridei Simen Kuf Pei Daled writes a long tshuva in Dini Hargasha, Lahuvi Talmidi Habacher Zalman Spitze. At the Kleisenberger Rebbe in the Shiurim says, you see ba'olol that when you're oiskim b'dini Aryeh for Tahara, that you could meshach shanim rabbis, and he says v'af pam lo yala b'daita shum machshava zara v'adara b'halimud mekadish u'metayra. Say, now, I think the Sam Seifa is considered sort of semi-Chassidish, right? I mean,
yeah. And
the Kleisenberger is certainly considered Chassidish, and these are big people who said they learned Hilchas Nida, the Marem Shik. I guess some Chassidim would call him Chassidish, and the Litta he would be considered Chassidish. So it would seem that they did learn, with the yeshiva, Masechtas Nida, and they were Chassidish. Isn't that interesting?
First of all, by the way, Reb Zalman Spitzer was later the item of Chasam Sofer. This is just beside the point. Yeah.
Okay.
One of the differences between the Chassidish and the Yeshivish Welt, going back to the Gru and Reb Chaim Volozhner, was on the concept of the Talmud Torah Keneged Kilam. Meaning, of course, Talmud Torah, the Limudei Torah, is the biggest thing of all. Torah Megine Matzle, as the Gemara says. So therefore, the Yeshivish Welt and the Ashkenazische Welt, like you said, the Chasam Sofer and the Maram Shik, they didn't have an issue. They didn't have an issue with learning certain sigyas, because they felt, since it's Torah Megine Matzla, and no harm can come out from it when you learn Torah. In the same sense, maybe the concept of learning philosophy, like the Meir and Avoichem, which was more accepted in the Yeshivish Welt, I think, than the Chassidish Welt, and same thing Shara Yichet, Chovesu with Shara Yichet. I think that even the Chasam Sofer learned Chovesu with Shara Yichet. I'm not sure about that, but generally.
Some Sefer said not to learn it with the Bachram.
Oh, not to learn with the Bachram.
Yeah, as well as Evan Ezra. Just for the
okay.
record.
Okay, so you see, the Sefer did have an issue with that, but I think in the Yeshivische Welt, was not a problem. On the other hand, in the Chassidische Welt, we believe that of course Talmud Torah Neged Kalam, but we also believe that you have to put your focus and priorities on other things as well. And the other thing besides Torah was Kadish and Tznius, and Kadish and Tznius, and also Hakira. This was the Soides. One of the Soides of Hasidus is to put a lot of emphasis on Minna Pshita and Kedusha, and Tznius is part of Kedusha. So therefore, even though Torah Megillah Matzle, but you have to. It's not absolute. Let's call it that. Let's call it, for a lack of better terms, it's not absolute. So that's why you have to also focus on other things as well.
So what did they learn in Chumash? I mean, did they learn the parsha of Lot, of Tamar and Yehuda, of Yosef and Eshes Peitifera? Like, what did they do by all these parts of Chumash?
Yeah, when Chumash we learn everything. Chumash we learn everything, right? We never skipped anything in Chumash.
Let me share with you a thought, Rav Kahane, that that unfortunately it's changing now. That's what I hear. But for thousands of years there was never any alcoholism by Jews, right? And I saw one of the Chachamim writes. He writes, because they knew that you use yayin for Kiddush, for Havdalah, for a Simcha. So when you're taught what something is used like in its proper way, it becomes an education. It becomes a chinuch, and therefore it's a chinuch. And dam here we use it yes, and dam nusman das nicht, and here we don't use it, right?
Yeah.
So. And unfortunately, they say sadly now, with also because of what's going on in Kadeshim of all things, the Fresserai, that is changing. But for thousands of years, so there is a svara that if you teach something in the proper way, so then we're taught. Okay, now we have kalim how to be oichezit, right? You have kalim and oiris. It gives you the kli to hold it. So when we're taught that in yeshiva, in Parshas Aryeh and Kedusha, what's yes and what's not adarabah. Not only is it not mitamei chas v'shalom, but on the contrary, it gives it a context, and it gives it a levush, and it gives it a perspective. Just like, let's say, drinking wine. Like, why wouldn't do you agree? Is that a svara that you hear or not?
About wine, first of all. I wouldn't say that for thousands of years we never drank wine. The Shlok Kodesh says that he says like that. Even though that you see Talmidei Chachamim and Chushav Yidden get drunk, okay, we should not try to copy it. We should not imitate it, because it's not proper. So the Shlok Kodesh says that in his time there was Chushav that got drunk, and
no doubt. Look, the Gemara says the Kohen Gadol's Asa B'Avoda Baltfila can't. There were, but I'm saying when you go to the Irish, it's like you just talk to them. It's like Shikr is a big like you never heard that in Yiddishkeit. You're not going to be meshadach with somebody he's a drunk. People, and I think part of the reason is because we got a chiduch in drinking. And I think there's an argument to be made, like if we get a chinuch in what's kedusha and when and how you talk about Aryeh and where in halacha this standing is, and you talk hilchos need, it explains the fact that there's a need. That means that there has to be precious min Aryeh. So I'm just stelling for it to svara to say that, on the contrary, by talking about it in the context of halacha, it gives it perspective and it gives it. If we don't have proper boundaries of what is and what isn't, so I think, isn't there an argument to be made by learning Hilchos Nida, by learning Aryeh, by learning this? So he says, this is proper and this isn't proper. This is when we drink wine and this isn't when we drink wine.
Okay.
This is
Yeah, I get the point. Okay, first let me just add that about this issue that, as I remember in Satmar, we never made an issue not to learn. For example, you asked me about Chumash. We never skipped a pussy because then it's obvious, you know. We tried to just ignore it. So Chumash, you can't ignore it. So therefore we didn't skip a pussy. But learning, you know, about making the sure of Kesibas Daf Tes instead of Kesibas Daf Kuf, you know, this is not obvious. You know, we're going to start Kesibas Peirik Shani, which is normal.
Yes.
So it's not obvious that we are skipping something. Okay,
right.
That's number one. Although I heard that in Square they are more strict about it and they are skipping things.
Hello, they take it out of the Chumash. If you look at the Skvera Chumash, the Psukim are taken out.
Yeah. Okay. So so going back to your point about so the question, you ask the age-old question: what's better for chinuch? Is it better to just be as insular as possible, you know, live in your own room,
yeah,
or is it better to open up your children? Let's talk about chinuch, about children. To open up your children and prepare them for life, for the world as it is, right?
But only through the window of Torah. I'm not talking about giving your kids internet. I'm talking about when we learn in a Chumash, when you learn in Halacha. So it's through the prism of Torah we prepare our kids for life. So that seems to be the debate, no?
So it's actually 2 points. One point is if Torah can do any harm, for a lack of a better word, Chas v'shulam. I wouldn't say that. You know, you have to be careful how to express but the concept that not everything in Torah is made for Bukhara. That's number one. And then there's another issue which how far do you prepare your child that once he goes out in the world, he should be able to have boundaries. He should be able to have boundaries versus no boundaries at all, because he was insular in the younger years, right? That's your question, right? So you're trying to combine an answer which is, since Torah in general is Megin and Matzla, plus so Torah is the best way to prepare for the world, right? So this is your argument.
This is what the Kleisenberger Rebbe really says in his, what I quoted, yeah.
Okay, but again, there's another. Going back to this of one of these stories of Chassidus. Chassidus actually means precious. So, on one hand, you're right. You know, you have to prepare your children that when he goes out to the world, he should know, he should have boundaries, right? Because when the boundaries at 25, when he's on the street, is different than the boundaries at 15. So you have to prepare him when he's 15. He should be able to live with the boundaries at 25. So the question is, how far do you open him up? Even with Torah, how far do you open him up? The same question can be asked about Kabbalah, right? The Kabbalah, there was, the general concept is you don't learn. I mean, except Chabad, most Hasidim, they don't learn Kabbalah, and it's advised that no one should touch Kabbalah and Sister Torah until 40 or 35. And even the Gemara says, right? So there's a concept that not everything in Torah is available for everyone at all the time. The concept of censoring things in Torah is not not a new concept. It's an old concept. With Maaseh Mekuva, you find this in Maaseh Mekuva, and then you find in the Gemara Bruchos, Mani Benaichem and Hagoyan. Right? You shouldn't teach your children Tanakh, too much Tanakh. That's how Rashi interprets this. That Hagoy means Tanakh. Some say Hagoy means the push pshat for Hagoy means means like to deep learning, to philosophy, thinking philosophical. There's a concept, that your child shouldn't, he should grow up naturally and pure, and then learn as he grows older. He can learn Tanakh, he can learn Kabbalah, he can learn philosophy if he wants. He can things like that. So this is not a new concept. So the concept of censoring Torah is not a new concept. And going back to what we discussed before. So since Kedusha and Mina Pshita was a big thing, was one of the Yisroel, so the Hasidic rabbis figured, that you should be strict on that and insular on that as much as possible. And
so Rabbi Kahane, then I guess when I have a program on or a discussion that's a little bit, some Hasidim would not want to listen to with their kids, I should say, look, if you go b'derech HaChasidim and you don't talk about Inyane Tznius, Aryeh, etc., Ishus, please, this show program is not for you, and close the radio. That's really what I should say. I guess so, to be sensitive to all the different, types of people, right?
Yeah, you should say, this is your Mesorah, and obviously your Mesorah is working, right? The Yeshiva Welt is as much as Chusha as the Chassidische Welt. We have different priorities a little bit, but your way is working and our way is working. So this is the pshat in IIwith. So if someone has an issue with that, you should close the radio. But as long as your what you're doing is based on your Mesorah, you're 100% right at what you do. And going back to what you mentioned before. How much do you teach your child? How much do you open your child to the world? How much do you prepare your child to the world? And you're right. In some sense, it's better. He should be used since his Bucherische Juden that he should have rules in the Bucherische Juden that will work when he gets older. And on the other hand, the Hasidim, didn't. They had a different opinion on that. Their opinion is to make them, to close them up, and then slowly, as it gets older, he opens them up a little bit more and more. So. And
is it working? Is it working in the Hasidic world? Like, do you find that, given the fact that you have iPhones and internet and billboards, etc., that is it working or is it just being buried under the carpet?
There will always be a few people, and when I say a few, I mean percentage-wise. As much as we grow, it will be more than a few. But I'm only talking about percentage-wise, relative to the general tzibur. So collectively, it's working. I mean, again, Hasidus is 250 years old, and Hasidus is working, Baruch Hashem.
I just mean to say that the walls of the ghetto have come down remarkably in the last 10 years or 15 years because of the internet, right? So do you find that the policy of not talking and not discussing, etc., particularly in the last 10 years, is it working like it worked for the 200 years that preceded it from the Baal Shem? Or do you find that now maybe, even in the Hasidic world, what's the use of high walls? If somebody in their pocket could have kol nevola shabaylam in his pocket. So do you maybe find that discussing things that previously had not been discussed is becoming necessary because the walls have crumbled somewhat?
There's definitely a challenge. There's definitely a challenge that wasn't before, but in the last 250 years, and maybe you can go back to 3,000 years since the Matan Torah, there was also always periods of enlightenment. Walls came down, even 150 years ago with the skula and libraries, and
I know that, but it was you had to go into a library, you had to go into a Beis Haskala. Here, a person could sit b'chadrei chadarim, where alle mine, treif zachen, and in b'chitzonius you wouldn't know anything, and in pnimius there's nothing left. So the question, I find it hard. I'm not 10, but I'm not 100, but I'm not 10. I don't think the world has seen such an onslaught of availability of media that like there is in the last 10 years or 15 years. It's something new. The world has advanced more. In the last, a person could have mamish, something that would need shizayin akiyim and tefillas to sit on in their pocket. So my question is it working given the change in the environment? And I know Hasidim also have iPhones, right?
yeah, Chassidim have iPhones, and but most Ehrliche Chassidim use the filter. And but again, your question, the question is if we should open up more since the walls of the ghetto came down. We should open up more in the younger years. So we should teach them.
We should inoculate more.
Inoculate more. We should train them in the younger years more, and part of the training is open them up a little bit and prepare them. Right. That's your point.
And talk to them about these issues. Right.
Yeah. Okay. Look, I'm not saying it's all or none, and I'm not a roof, so I can't speak.
And by the way, Rabbi Kahane, neither am I. I'm just achred and learning. That's all. I'm having a discussion. I'm not has shalom insinuating or suggesting anything of the like.
Yeah. So in details, I leave it up for the Rabbunim how to to prepare, how to change a little bit the chinuch. I don't know. I leave it up to them. But generally speaking, on the concept of opening up, preparing versus closing in, which works better collectively. We're not talking about individuals because there will always be individuals for the cloud. For the cloud. So which way works better for the cloud? I still think that there must be. Let's put it this way: there must be institutions, organizations, yeshivas, kehillas that carry the concept of closing in for the people who feel this works better for them. Okay. Let's put it this way, because let me just add this, because although this nunis joinus, right, with the internet and everything, you can have your library in your pocket versus the library on the street, but this type of nisyonis, I don't think it's new. It's new in a detail that you can have it in your pocket. But this type of nisyonis, that the world is changing and the world, and the world is opening more up. This goes back hundreds of years. The wall of the ghetto came down in Germany and in Europe 200, 300 years ago, and then again the Askula and books. And books, they had the same question at that time. So the fact of the matter is that the places that kept a certain amount of insularity, for the lack of a better term, certain amount of insularity collectively worked better, I think. But that being said, my father, Oliver Shulam, who he was a Holocaust survivor. So Holocaust survivor. Then after the war, he was all over. Obviously, he was in London, and he learned Torah. So he told me like this. He told me that a good bucher from Oiberland, from Ashkenaz, and the Yeshiva, which was, like you said, prepared, was much stronger, was more able to fight on his joiners than a bucher from the Chassidish Welt who was not used to the open world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in other words, like they said, if it doesn't kill you, If it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. So that's the point. If same thing with Chabad, if they are going all over the world, they're living in all different places, but not too many Yidden. If they make it, they're much stronger. Then the Zionist, they can fight in the Zion. But again, collectively, I don't think that works collectively.
Can I go off on a side? Chabad and Satma have for many years been at loggerheads, right? Right.
Loggerheads.
They didn't get along so well, and this is just another. I'm just sticking. Isn't it astonishing to you that the main fundraisers for this Chabad Chassid who was in jail, Rabashkin, were Satma?
Yeah, because this is one of the things of Satmar Rebbe, which teached his people, his Sibber, that when it comes to an other Yid, when an other Yid is in trouble, in big trouble, then all the shittas and everything falls away. And Ahavas Yisroel and Tzedukah in Chesed is one of the Yisaitis, one of the Yisaitis of Ayit. So
Beautiful. Let me ask you on another topic that we they don't learn English or math or any Limudei, I was told, in Satma in the high school. I'm assuming that's true. I have no way. I mean, I don't have any friends in Satmar High School. And my question to you is that given that we know, the Gemara says, Chayiv Adam Lamed B'nai Umnis, Emeinim Lamdei Umnis, Malamdei Listis, and given the fact that the Shulchan Aruch paskins this way, Sayin Yeredeya, Sayin Erechayim, in Hilchos Shabbos and in Hilchos Talmud Torah, etc., and given that poverty is such a great problem in our community, Parnassa, especially for those. I'll tell you something. I'm on the board of Touro. And the reason I'm on the board of Touro is because Rabbi Aaron's sheet I learned in Lakewood was about college. He used to say, Kol Bayel Lo Yeshiva. And they learn all kinds of kfir there, and they mishsach, alamine taruvis over there. Touro teaches Parnassa b'kedusha. In other words, it's separate. They don't have kfir there, and I remember meeting a Satmar fellow who worked he said he worked in B&H Photo, and he was making $20 an hour, which he said was great until he had his seventh kid. And then he got into Touro, and I remember I met him, and he said it saved his life. He became an accountant. He was able to. But he said, I was lucky. He says, I struggled. I was good with numbers. Given how hard Parnassa is, and given that Chayiv Adam Lamed B'nai Umnis, and given that the Gemara in Bab Mitzvah says, Zubeis Chayeyem is to teach them in Umnis, why don't we today, why aren't the Chassidish Yeshivas makbid to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic so that when they go out, they could become, if they have to become an accountant, if they have to do books, if they have to write a business letter, they could write a business letter. Why don't they do it la halacha? And the Tur, when he brings us in Shulchan Aruch in Shin Vav, I believe that the Tur's lashon is that Chayiv Adam Lamed B'nai Umnis. He says even on Shabbos you could find a thing. He says because if you don't teach him Umnis, he says Digduke Aniyas Mavir Adam Al Daite Val Das Kahane. So why don't Chassidim who are control their own curriculum create a curriculum that's without kfira and without the things that you don't need, but that when guys leave, they should be able to have Beis Chayeyem. The Yerushalmi says, what's the Makar, the Chayiv Adam Lamed B'nai Umnis? Because it says V'chay Bohem. And why do you have to have guys struggling and crying and muching their neshama out? And it's not like between the ages of 13 and 17, the boys are mamish, those extra hour or 2 hours in the afternoon, they're finishing Tzais and Estivus,
The question basically is, Am Chanoichel Nar Al Pidake Gam Kiyasken LeYusir Memeni, right? What's the right shot of this pusik, right? You're saying that preparing. Okay, let me start from the beginning, and you're going to edit it, right? Okay, so let's start again. The basic question is on the pshat of the pusik Chanoichel Nar Al Pidake Gam Kiyasken LeYusir Memeni, right? So Shlomo Melech says that you should mechanech your children and talmidim in a way that will help him and will guide him when he gets older. Okay, when a person gets older, things change. So you need to prepare him in the younger years, that everything you're preparing for will guide him all his life. Okay. So the question is preparedness. How do you prepare, and how much do you prepare? So there's one argument which you make that you need to prepare him and open him up to the world as much as possible and guide him. The other option is that you need to prepare him. Okay, I think that's okay. I'm trying to give you a short answer on a difficult question. Should I start again? Hello?
Yeah, but I honestly, I think we covered that topic so well. Why do you want? What did we miss?
Yeah. Okay.
You said it's halon v'allahu, and I accept that.
Yeah. No, I'm trying to give you some examples. For example, 150 years ago, when the scholar began publishing books and newspapers. Okay, this was a new thing. So in some circles, they just ignored it. In other circles, for example, Belz was the I would say the leader in fighting Haskula in Galicia in Poland, with an influence on England as well. So, but Belzer Rebbe, what he did, he took the tactics from the Maskilim. He opened a newspaper called the Machzika Hadas, which is basically the first Orthodox newspaper. And what he did with the newspaper, that he put in Divrei Torah, Divrei Chizik, a little bit of news. So you understand my point? So what he did is he did what they did, but he used it to strengthen his own kehillah. So what I'm trying to say is that sometimes we do new things that wasn't done before, because we need to react to the to the general culture. So your point that you need to modify a little bit with the changing times is valid, but it has to be done the right way, and it has to be done only by a Gudel B'Yisroel, with a purpose to strengthen Yiddishkeit. So this is what I was trying to add.
So can we go back? Let's go to the other question, okay?
Okay, sure. So your question about secular education in yeshivas, right? That's your question. So this question entails a few sub-questions. Okay, number one, there's the law. So we need to make sure that what we do is aligned with the law. And if the law, especially in New York State, if the law is not, contradicts to our Messiah and what we need to do, we need to change the law. That's number one. Particularly in most states, there's no law. The state, especially in the South, the state does not get involved in how you teach your children. But New York State does, and I understand that the state needs the responsibility for the state to make sure that everyone teaches their children properly. So the law must, we need to make sure that what the law says and what we do, and the Messiah is on the same page. That's number one. Because Dina the Mechisa Dina, and particularly in the Malchus Chesed, we cannot go against the law. That's number one. Number two, the other part of the question is.
So, Adarab, if you want to do the law, you should for sure have English. Okay. I'm asking why you don't, not why you do.
Okay, why I don't? So we teach English until 13 years, and we teach English, math. We learn history until the 13 years for boys. Girls obviously, they get educated in secular education until they graduate, until 17 years, and they also teach them some kind of science like biology, even cosmology and the atoms, neutron, protons, electrons, and all those things. That's for girls. So girls get more secular education than the boys. The reason the boys don't is, again, it goes back to two things. Number one is the Messiah. This fight goes back hundreds of years, and so the Messiah was. When I say we, I mean Satmar. I can't speak for the literature, and I can't speak for other Hasidus. I can only speak of Satmar. And even more, Satmar, Brooklyn. I don't know what they teach in upstate Satmar or other places. I can speak of Satmar, Brooklyn. So we do teach English, math, and I think geography until the Bar Mitzvah. And then we don't teach because it's number one is the Messiah. Number two, we believe that the Bucher needs he needs to learn. His whole focus and everything needs to be in learning. From the Yeshiva perspective, now, if a parent they want to teach him at home or whatever other things, no problem. I don't think someone will make an issue. I know many people who got extra secular education, privately, and I don't think anyone will make an issue. But as far as the Yeshiva is concerned, as far as the institution is concerned, we don't teach because it's against the Messiah, and we believe that Bukhram, the head must be 99% in learning. Okay, now.
And we have a lot of data that's saying that people who don't have a high school education struggle their whole lives to earn a living, and I think the Hasidic community sees a lot of that.
Okay, now, I don't have the data. By Hasidim, but I do know many people who are very successful in real estate, in businesses like we just mentioned B&H, Adorama, and
hello,
so the question is,
I know smokers who live till 85. And obese people who live to 85. But if you look at the bell curve of the average, most smokers don't live to 85, and it's not a lot of obese people in nursing homes. You know what I mean? So there's no doubt that there are people who will succeed despite everything. But if you look at the majority of the Hasidic community lives at the poverty level or
you have the numbers
around.
Okay.
And it's a lot of it is like the guy who met me. He says without Touro, he said I would have spent my entire life in B&H. With hundreds of guys because there's no other place for me to go. So it's just common sense, right?
Okay, let me answer the question. So, like you said, let's not take individual example because for every person that says had to go to Touro to make a decent living, I have another person that didn't went to those, and there are millions and they're millionaires and maybe even billionaires. But so let's not talk individual cases. I would really like to know the numbers. In other words, the numbers in Brooklyn by the Hasidic people compared to the general population. Really, I would really like the numbers.
Let's take a simple number, okay?
Okay.
Monroe, New York, is the single of all 700 or 800 townships in the United States, is number one leader in percentage of a community taking government programs like Medicaid, SNAP, Medicare, food stamps, welfare, etc. Number one in the United States. I think that sort of proves the point that without, if you don't know the language and you don't know simple math, you're going to struggle. That's number one in the United States.
Okay.
And I know that there are probably some people who maybe have businesses off the books, on the books. I mean, you live in that community. Poverty is a real issue. Parnas is a real issue. If there's a chiyuv l'lamed l'adam b'nai umnis, and chassidim are makbid on the Shulchan Aruch, and the Shulchan Aruch paskins it in a few different places, why aren't they more makbid on? And if they control their own yeshivas and they could keep kfira off the books, and they could keep, the things that aren't necessary. Why aren't they Mekayim this mitzvah? That's my question.
Okay. So again, everyone agrees with you, and especially Satmar Rebbe, more than Rabbi Kotler, more than the Yeshivisha, that everyone, I shouldn't say everyone, that most people need to go to work. Okay, koilel, lifelong koilel is only for the minority. For the Bnei Aliyah, like the Gemara says with Reb Shimon, for the Bnei Aliyah, most people, the vast majority need to work. Everyone agrees from a Satmar perspective. Everyone agrees with that. Everyone agrees that we need to prepare the boy, the bucher, that when he grows up, he should be able to earn a decent living. Everyone agrees. There's no argument there either. Now, everyone agrees that the decent living in New York State is, the average income in New York State, the median income in New York State is $65,000. Okay, so let's not talk about the median income for a minute. We'll come back to that later. So again, so the only argument, so now you bring me an example from Kadish. So you're right, but let me fix one point of your example. The fact that Kadish and I would say all Hasidic communities, and even Yeshivish communities, are disproportionately on social services, mainly food stamps, Section 8, and Medicaid, not cash welfare. So the reason for that has nothing to do with poverty. In other words, in New York State, like I said, New York State median income, the middle income in New York State is $65,000 a year. Someone with a large family, like 4 or 5 children, is eligible for those programs, even though he's middle income, even though he makes $65,000, like average New York person. So this is not a good example, because even though we will learn English and we will learn everything in school and we will get a degree, the average will be $65,000-$70,000, like all other people in New York State. So, and we will still be eligible disproportionately on social services just because we have large families. So this is not a good example. But I do agree with you that KJ has an issue based on the 2010 census. The median income in KJ was $24,000, and that's an issue that needs to be fixed. In other words, if KJ brings up the median income to $65,000, the issue is solved. Okay. Now, so you were saying the reason KJ is $24,000 is because because they don't know English, they don't know science, biology.
Rabbi Kahane, I'm not saying that that's the reason. I'm saying that if you could speak the language and you understand how to do math, right, you have a far better chance of getting the opportunity to earn a living than if you don't speak language and you don't need math. And if you have some basic writing skills, you could write a letter to a vendor. You could read a brochure. You have basic computer skills. So am I saying if everybody there did, everybody would know? But what we're dealing, if it would go from 25 to something much greater than 25. I don't know what the number is. But Chayev Adam Melamed B'nai Umnis is the Gemara saying if you learn an Umnis, everybody's going to make a living. It says Vayechtal Evyon Mikala Kerev Aretz, right? But if the Gemara says if you teach an Umnis, the biggest school of a Parnas is to do what the Gemara says. So I'm just asking, given that we could do it and you could teach it b'kedusha, you could teach it without kfir, and it's a chiyuv l'halacha. I'm just asking. I'm not asking about I'm only asking about the Chassidish community because you're Chassidish. I'm asking the same thing about the non. I think Moshe Feinstein, who on the Daiti was the biggest paisik the Western world will ever see till Mashiach comes. His kids went to college. Reuven, well, his einik, not to college, to high school. He was very against college. Moshe, he was fire against it. He has chuvas in Meir Gimel, some in Pei Beis, Pei Aleph, Pei Beis, very against. But his 2 yeshivas had a high school in the not the Darash Moshe, but one of them. He says very clearly that every kid should go to high school. Why? Because it almost falls into the Derech Eretz Kadmol Torah. If you speak the language, you're more presentable. You have an opportunity. I'm just asking, why do we at 13, do we sort of, my Machon was cut a child's hands off? What's the logic to it?
Okay. Again, so every one of us knows math. So your only question is English, right? That's the question. Let's focus on.
No, it's not the case. I told you I had Hasidic boys who I spoke to, and they know barely math. If me and you math stopped when we were 12 years old, right? I don't know. You forget math. You this, you that. It has to be a chazara. That.
You're saying that you met Hasidic boys that didn't know that 10 times 10 is 100 is 100.
Yeah, that's what happened. 5 times 5 he thought was 50, and a boy from who listens to my program, a Hasidic boy, called me up and asked me.
What?
And he's getting married. He said he wants to go into real estate.
Okay.
So can I give him some advice? I said, do you know English? So he spoke like a little bit of a broken English. He said, I speak English, like a little broken. I said, do you know any math? He said, I know math. So I figured, let me interview him. So I said, okay, for a joke. I said, how much is 5 times 5? It was quiet. He said, 50. I said, It's not 50. He said, 100. Now, I want to tell you, when I lived in Lakewood, I had a yeshiva in my shul that didn't have English, and I asked the boys, I said, do you know how to spell? Yeah. I asked them, okay, what's your schedule today? Do you have any English? I said, how do you spell schedule? So he says, S-Q, and I know a Q needs a U. He's spelling schedule. And I said, if you're not the Echad Yaitza, and you ever have to do anything, and you can't write a sentence, what's the thing, right? What's the mahalach? I think it's the Shulchan Aruch and the Gemara and the Achronim and the Rishonim say it's neged Torah. So why do we do it? I'm asking a shaila. That's all. Not asking just you.
Okay, so let me answer the question. Let me ask you a question. So I do agree with you 100% that we need to know English properly and we need to know math properly. When I was in yeshiva, I would say, when was it? 30 years ago, they teach English, they teach math. And by the way, my English is a little bit broken because I didn't, I didn't have geduld to go to English. I only went, let's not talk about me personally. So, but the friends of mine that I know, who went to English and they took it seriously, 2 hours a day for English and math. They know proper English. I don't know. The truth is, I don't know what they teach today.
So I had, let me tell you, I had on Reb Gedalia Weinberger, who runs PCCS in Lakewood.
Yes. Which
takes Bachrim, Chassidisha, Litvish, not Bachrim, young Galite who are coming out of Kyle, and they teach them a parnasa. They teach them computers, insurance, accounting, whatever it is. And he said, and he's on the program, he said, we stopped taking guys who didn't go to high school because they're so far behind, we can't teach them anything. So it seems what we learn until we're 12 or 13 isn't enough.
No, I'm not sure. Like I said, when I was in yeshiva 2 years ago, all my friends who took English seriously, and they studied for 2 hours a day, they knew English and math. They did, and even myself, which I didn't take it so seriously. I knew math. English I didn't, but I knew math.
Okay.
Very well.
So
I agree with you.
We're basically agreeing. It's just a question: at what point do they know English or math?
Right. So, but I do agree with you that English and math is important. It's not just it's important. Satmar Rebbe said that we should learn English and math, and it's actually part of the Messiah. It's part of the tradition. It's part of Menschheit. It's part of the law. I mean, there's no excuse not to do it. I want to argue. I want to argue on that. But again,
Rav Kahane. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Not a roof. I'm just saying my opinion. So
yeah.
Well,
Rav Kahane, thank you very much for sharing your time with us. We have on the phone with us from New York, Rabbi Moshe Broyde. He's a director of Limudei Yisroel Institute, a Talmud of Teradas, a Musmach from Rabelsky Zichron Levracha, both Yair Yadin Yadin. He was a chaver and his bezdin. Welcome, Rabbi Broyde.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me on.
Could you tell us what is the Limudei Yisroel Institute? What is its goal? What is its Weltanschauung?
Okay. Limudei Yisroel Institute started many years ago as a Talmud by Rabelsky, and I was learning most of the day. I needed some parnassus, so I became an English teacher in the local Yeshivas in Brooklyn. And over the years, I stayed there for many years, learning and working as a teacher. And through the years, I realized that there are numerous problems with the general studies departments in Yeshivas, and I decided to try to do something about it. So this was the impetus to start the Limudei Yisroel Institute. And the Limudei Yisroel Institute focuses on three broad topics, three broad areas. The first is to make a Torah secular curriculum. And the second is to make kosher textbooks and workbooks for the yeshivas. And the third is to train young light and the Machon to become teachers. So we are working on all those three aspects simultaneously.
What's wrong with today's curriculum?
Well, I found as a teacher that a lot of the Talmidim, they have almost no shaykhs to the connect. They don't connect at all to the material. The history seems to be disconnected from their lives. The science is completely almost unconnected in any way to them, and besides of that, I mean, besides of the lack of meaning to the Bachrim, and to even like older boys, it also has a lot of problems with it. There's a tremendous amount of hidden and sometimes not so hidden kfira and apikarsis in it, and it's like turns a lot of Bachrim off. A lot of people, I just met somebody. He told me that he loved to learn in the morning. In the afternoon, he came. He was like upgekilled. His whole Yiddishkeit was weakened when he had to learn all these topics that were connected to what he was learning in the morning. So the curriculum needs to be revamped, not to be changed because it's not our abilities. It's the state's prerogative to what they want to teach. But we have to do it. We have to make it matim. We have to make it connect to the Bachrim, to the youth of today, and a lot of that can be done through a Torah lens. And
how do you do that? You publish your own textbooks. What do you do?
Well, that's part of what we're doing. We made we just published the first Torah no problem earth science textbook. It's available today. It has about 80% of the New York State curriculum in it, and it has no problematic parts to it at all. And Adrabah, we put Hashem's name on every single page, that people should see that the Rabbi Shalom made the world, and made the science, and made the planet, and more than that, we connect, and it's part. One of the things that we're doing is making a PowerPoint, and the PowerPoints have connections interspersed throughout the PowerPoint. We have connections to Torah ideas and hashkafa, like Shar Bechina hashkafa, like Victor Miller would like us to teach it. So we don't just learn it the way the Goyim want us to learn the material, but we do it in the way that the Rabbi Shalom wants us to learn science, to see his neflayos habayre, and to recognize that he is the manig of the Bria. And the same thing goes for science, the same thing goes for history, and it can be done in almost every single topic throughout so that makes it very meaningful to the Bachrim. So besides making it kosher, but we also have a big push to make a meaningful curriculum through PowerPoints and that type.
Now, do you think boys should be learning secular studies in high school, or should they be skipping high school? What's your opinion about that?
That question is not up to me. It's this has been a machlokes rishonim, not it's not a machlokes of today. This is a machlokes going back 1,000 years already. Should we be studying secular studies or not? And there was the daily rishonim that said no, and there was the daily rishonim that said yeah. So I mean, it's already it's not for me to say what should be.
When you say Gedolei Rishonim, when you say Gedolei Rishonim said no, who would you be referring to?
Yeah, if you look in the Rashba, there was a big machlokes in about 800 years ago.
About studying
over
science.
This issue. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just science, because in the curriculum that they studied in those days, and was you had to study Aristotle, and Aristotle believed in an eternal world. So that was clear. There was also a lot of.
But what about things like reading, writing, arithmetic? What's your opinion about that?
Yeah, there's a tremendous value to those materials. There's no question about it. It just has to be done in a Torah way, in a beneficial way for people to take something out of it.
So how many yeshivas, when you print your material, how many yeshivas do you think will be using it?
We hope everybody.
And when will it be printed? When will we be able to get it?
It's available. It's available today. Any yeshiva that wants it. We have a couple of yeshivas that are actually using some of the material that I've been publishing already for about 5 years. Regents review books that were kosher. I did it with Rebelsky.
And who uses it? Which yeshivas use it?
We had almost every yeshiva in Brooklyn has Bacham who used it for the Regents. And Direcor, Torah used part of my biology that I worked with Rebelsky and how to present the problematic parts according to Rebelsky. And we have Shari Chaim and Farakwe using it. My book, the one that was just published, and it's a Torah alternative to what's being taught outside. The Beyda has been calling for already close to 200 years, 150 years for change of the textbooks, and it should be kosher. And about time that it should be done.
Rabbi Moshe Broyde, director of Limudei Yisroel Institute, who is printing, publishing kosher textbooks without kfir in them, biology, history, science. Rabbi Broyde, thank you very much for your.
If I just can add one more point. One more point. It's actually 2 more points. There are parts that are problematic as well. So for those, I had the chus to learn by Rebelsky. I had the opportunity to publish little pamphlets and Regents review books that were kosher the way Rebelsky felt that they should be taught. And now we're publishing, according to Rav Feldman Shlita, publish books that deal with the problematic content in a Torah way. And the truth is, one more point is that it's very, very crucial that there should be Bnei Torah who are teachers. Without Bnei Torah as teachers, it's going to be very difficult to have any of these changes implemented, because if you have a secular teacher, how could he bring Toradic secular studies to the Bachim? He doesn't know what it is. So we really need Bnei Torah as teachers, and if there's anybody who's interested, we offer free training for Ingalite and the Chanchim to become teachers.
Rabbi Broyde, thank you very much for your hishtadlus to have a kosher chinuch.
Thank you very much.
Cool stuff. Take care.